Hi, very good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all are safe and doing good in such a COVID situation. We have seen that, COVID has impacted us a lot, and 2019-20 has been a watershed year. During this time, we have seen and witnessed the rise and falls of many organizations. Simultaneously, a myriad of challenges were addressed during these challenging months by leaders who turned to the HR functions for the innovative and the fast solutions across the spectrum. So join us here now to learn how our HR landscape has been continuously transforming to make our social business fabric to achieve agility, build a resilience muscles, and thorough adoption of digital technology. So I welcome our core speakers, Pramila Clive as CEO from the Genset Technology, Raju Mistry, who is the Chief Human Resource Officer with CIPLA, Mr. Jasprit Bindra, and Mr. R.S. Kalsi. So I'll keep it over to you, Pramila, for the discussion to initiate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Varun. Good day to all the participants. We are all glad to be here in a very, very important and relevant session today. And I'm sure the organization you come from, you will have some takeaway from this session and you'll walk away with things that would be very relevant and useful to you. For the format for this session, we will have Mr. Jasprit Bindra talk about his views, his perspectives and insights into this very relevant topic. How do you really create value for your stakeholders, and more so in the new context? Followed by that, we will have Dr. Raju Mistry, Mr. Kalsi and me share our experiences from the businesses we come from. What are we seeing? What's changing here? What's been the challenge in adapting to the new normal? And as we settle into a new world post-pandemic, what are the fundamental shifts we are seeing in the whole concept of value creation? So with that, I will request Mr. Jasprit Bindra to please share his perspectives with all of us. You're on mute, Mr. Bindra.
Okay, can you hear me now? Lovely.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pramila, for that for the introduction, and it's great to be here in this very august panel with you, Ms. Mistry, and with Mr. Kalsi. Value creation is a continuous exercise. It's something that we as practitioners in industry are pretty much whether it's value creation at a financial level or at an employee level or a shareholder level, it's something which is our constant endeavor. However, the last year, as we know and continuing, has been an extremely discontinuous year for us, and it's been a very disruptive year for us. With the pandemic happening, many rules have changed, and the way we used to work, a lot of that in itself has changed, and the entire construct of therefore working, of creating value now is in a different space. So what I am going to do with the time allocated to me is that perhaps I'm going to throw the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit and be a little provocative. I'm going to talk about how COVID has changed everything, and therefore basis that change, if you accept it, what are the new rules in a sense, okay, of value creation is what obviously the answer to that is far more difficult, and therefore I will have the three of you do that in your discussion. I'm going to possibly talk about some of the questions. So if you bear with me, I will just share something, and if someone can tell me whether they can see the deck that I have. If someone can just let me know. Hi, can you see that? Because I cannot see any of you the way the UI is. So if you can just let me know verbally if you can see my...
Yes, we can see it. It's
okay.
on.
Okay, because I only see my presentation, I don't see you. Okay, thank you very much. So look, just as a quick introduction, I used to be the Chief Digital Officer at the Mahindra Group, driving digital transformation, Microsoft for many years before that. Now I work on digital transformation. I teach that for Harvard and for ISB. And I speak, and I've written a couple of books on that the Tech Whisperer, and the Immune Organization. What I'm going to be talking about today is in the context actually of my second book, which talks about how the world is changing because of COVID, and the rules of value creation therefore will need to change. As I had said earlier, that the year starting March 2020 and continuing now, so it's been a year, has been a very different year for us. Many people have been calling COVID a black swan, taking from Nassim Taleb's famous black swan terminology, and saying that, look, this has been a black swan because black swans are supposed to be both unpredictable as well as massively disruptive. However, even Taleb says that the COVID pandemic was actually not a black swan. It was highly disruptive, but it was entirely predictable. In fact, Bill Gates had predicted it very, very accurately 4 or 5 years back. What has been a black swan, however, in my opinion, if not the pandemic, has been the lockdowns that the pandemic has caused. And this lockdown is what has changed everything and disrupted everything. And frankly, lockdowns can be caused by things other than pandemics. And going forward, we'll probably have many such more disruptive events which are going to cause lockdowns and similar stuff. And therefore, it's going to be a much more chaotic and tumultuous world of which we have just seen a trailer a little bit. Now, even as we kind of go through this pandemic, our big hope, the light at the end of the tunnel, has been the vaccine. Now, if you know a vaccine does not cure a pandemic or a disease. A vaccine only prevents a disease. And so basically, if you get vaccinated, because of the way it works, it causes your body to create new antibodies. And these antibodies, learn how to fight this disease. And then next time when a disease like this happens, the body is ready. It knows that, this is the disease, and it's ready with its antibodies to counter the disease. Now, if we were to kind of twist this around and say that, look, even as the COVID pandemic unfolds and rises and comes down and rises and comes down around us, what if we think of COVID itself as a vaccine? So think of COVID as a vaccine from an organizational context. And what if we learn from it today and start producing antibodies today, so that next time a disruption like this happens, our organizations are ready. They have become more resilient. They have become immune, and therefore the immune organization. And therefore the whole reason why organizations and its employees exist, which is for creating value. How can we create those antibodies so that value creation continues and sometimes, in fact, accelerates? So that's what's really the thesis is in that sense from this pandemic viewpoint. In fact, Nassim Taleb himself not only speaks about black swans, he also speaks about this concept of anti-fragility. And that's very important from a 10x viewpoint that we are thinking right now. So, fragile systems are those which get damaged by disorder. Something happens, it falls down, it's a fragile system. Resilient systems or organizations are those which actually stand fast. Anti-fragile, which is the opposite of fragile, are those which actually benefit or gain from this disruption or disorder. And these anti-fragile organizations are the ones which, irrespective of the disruptions, are the ones which will grow at, whatever be the metric be, but grow that metric at an exponential rate, at a 10x rate rather than a normal rate. And so how can we learn from this pandemic and become anti-fragile and therefore exponentially grow value? Is what I'm trying to kind of ask. And maybe there are a few examples I want to give, or a few instances I want to give. So, what I did was that in my little book, I kind of talked about the 7 antibodies for organizational immunity and growth. And, you can see these here. And what I'm going to do is, in the next 10 minutes, very quickly go through each one of them. And, I would love to see how in the discussion, perhaps some of us identify with some of these and is that we have created because of the disruption that has happened. Decentralization, digital transformation, reimagining customer experience, building a partnership ecosystem, digitization and automation as separate from digital transformation, lifelong learning, and then the miraculous transformation of mindset and culture. These are the 7 antibodies I believe that if organizations produce learning from this pandemic, the whole rules of value creation will completely change. Now, decentralization is probably the most important. If you think about it, organizations or functions which got decentralized fast survived the pandemic much better. So this whole work from home, which I'm sure all of us have been talking about today, this whole work from home, work from anywhere construct is really the decentralization of work. And it was not only work that got decentralized. Education got decentralized. Retail with e-commerce, omni-channel, that's how retail survived. Healthcare, suddenly we were kind of, there were hospitals which we would only go for very necessary stuff, but then it got decentralized because we were doing video calls with doctors, which we had never thought of doing before. Even hospitality, as the pandemic is easing out, we are preferring to go to smaller, decentralized places rather than large hotels. And so one of the ways and one of the things which we need to learn is that how in our way of working and our business models, how can we become more decentralized? Because decentralized systems actually are far more resilient to disruptions than our centralized systems. The gig economy actually is a great example of that, and it's the gig economy which actually took us through this entire pandemic. The other bit is obviously digital, and I know it is a big topic and a big discussion for today, and the area that I work on a lot. One of the things that we saw during the pandemic is that companies whose business models were 100% digital were anti-fragile. They actually did a 10x value growth. You look at Zoom, you look at Netflix, etc. Entirely 100% digital models were anti-fragile. Business models which were purely physical had to stop. Supply chains got disrupted, etc. Now, every business model cannot be 100% digital. But I think one of the things which we will learn from this and will become a rule for value creation going forward is that how do we make our business models as digital as possible? So restaurants have a small physical footprint, and then a whole lot of sending out meal kits and food, etc. Events, small events plus small in a hall, socially distanced, plus air meet kind of events that we are having right now. Similarly with retail, similarly with banking. And so going digital or becoming as digital as possible is the other impetus for value creation in disruptions like this. Customer journeys have changed. We don't want to go to big hotels anymore. We are scared of airports. Even when the whole thing gets better, we still don't want to get into crowds. And so, the customer journeys of customers are going to change. And so how can we use technology, mapping, AR, VR, etc., to make our company's products and offerings more akin or more similar to these new customer journeys is the third way. The fourth way.
Mr. Bindra, I'm very sorry. I'm seeing the audience saying they're not able to hear anything.
Oops.
So I think, can we just check? Is there any issue with audio?
Sure. I seem to. You can hear, right? You can hear me?
Yeah, we are able to hear. Mercy, if you're on the call, you want to check, because multiple participants are just posting saying they can't hear anything and no audio at all.
But now it's written saying we can hear, I can hear, it's audible.
Yeah. People can hear. I think it should be with 1 or 2 people. That's all right. But the others are saying they can hear.
Okay. I think audience can hear now.
Yes.
Okay. Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let me just figure out how to make this happen again. Okay, can you see my slides now? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me know. The fourth thing, from a value creation during a disruption viewpoint, and this actually goes across any metric of value creation that we might think of, is the fourth antibody, in a sense, as to how companies which either had a great partnership ecosystem or built very quickly a partnership ecosystem survived the pandemic. Again, it's a bit of decentralization. Anything where everything you are doing, if any disruption happens, you kind of are not very resilient. But partnerships which are internal to your business model rather than just external or just something which you do because they're good to do. So, for example, during the pandemic, you might be aware ITC Foods suddenly could not sell because all retail had closed down. And so they tied up with Domino's. Spencer's Retail tied up with Rapido. Liquor, for the first time, actually started getting delivered through Swiggy. In fact, on a lighter note, that's how I figured out why Swiggy is called Swiggy. And there were a lot of such partnerships which happened, which made these companies somehow work. And so one of the other things that we will learn, hopefully, from this is that if you want to continue providing value, especially customer value, in times of disruption, partnerships ecosystems help, because a web of partners will always get less impacted than a centralized entity, and therefore it will be far more immune. The fifth one, about digitization automation, it's something which I think everyone has been talking about. In fact, I think that getting out of the pandemic, every company is going to invest a lot in automation, because machines don't fall sick with viruses. And so, digitizing using RPA, messengers, etc., whatever be the function, whether it be an HR function or a financial function, I think this will be something which will go on steroids. And automated companies, again, will be able to continue adding value even during disruptions. I think this is close to our heart, given that this is an HR convention. One of the things that the pandemic taught us, that as an employee, for exponential employee value creation, the pandemic taught us that we have to become lifelong learners. The fact that jobs might just go away and we can't only be a specialist in one thing. The whole future of work, where you're talking about lifelong learning. In fact, Harvard is experimenting with a 60-year MBA course, for example. Multiple gigs make you much more anti-fragile. One company, many employees, will probably give way to one employee, many companies. And employees themselves will be responsible for their jobs and skills, not companies, because the way to be resilient as an employee and the way to add value to your career as an employee, I think disruptions teach us, is that it's good to be multi-skilled and to be a lifelong learner, so that if something goes away, there's always something else that you can fall back on. The final antibody, and I think I've got very senior professionals with me here, some of them very senior HR professionals. One of the things I think the pandemic, or a disruption like the pandemic, has been extremely good at is this, what I call the almost miraculous transformation of mindset and culture. CEOs who never would even think of or even talk about working from home or anywhere suddenly realized its value. Not to be done all the time, but that it was something which was a credible alternative, and there could be a hybrid which could happen. Decision making became a lot more decentralized. The pandemic did what probably a lot of HR professionals were asking the businesses to do, to become more delegative, to be decentralized, and to trust their employees. And because we were in such a situation, that happened automatically. Risk experimentation increased. Companies suddenly discovered that they were not only there for profit, but they were also there for a purpose, and they started building stuff which was not necessarily their core products, but were helping during the pandemic. And so I think, and again, this basically made as we know, employees like to work with companies which have a purpose rather than anything else, and purpose is what adds to value. And so I think that has been another big thing. So what I want to do is, I just talked about these 7 things. And what I want to leave you with as we move into the discussion on value creation is this, what I call the Covet Paradox. And it's very interesting. But COVID has slowed down the world, but accelerated change. I'll say that again. It has slowed down the world, but it has accelerated change. And so how do we cope with that one end, this world around us slowing down, and at the other end, this change accelerating? And in this kind of a confused scenario, work with figuring out how do we perhaps continue some of the things that we did towards creating 1x, 5x, 10x value, but on the other hand, also learn new things. Because as I kind of quote this very often as a closing slide, which is from Lord of the Rings, and Frodo Baggins, who's the hobbit there, says to the wise wizard that I wish it need not have happened in my time, says Frodo Baggins. So do I, said Gandalf the wizard. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And so this is the time that has been given to us. And it is in this time that we need to figure out as to what are the new rules given this disruptive scenario of value creation, and how some of the older rules still make sense, but we have to kind of bring in some new thinking so that we can continue adding value the way we used to. So I will stop here, Pramila and team, and I guess I would have done less than 25 minutes which was my target, but I wanted to kind of keep it very short so that I could shock you and give you some time to think, and then we can start talking. Back over to you, Pramila.
Thank you very much, Jaspreet. Thank you. Fantastic context setting for this session. I think I loved some of the terms that you really talked about there. Especially, I'll pick up the one. I think the new rule is no rule. I see there's no point in making all the rules. If you have learned one thing, is that you have to trash the rules and just go by responding to what's happening around us. Thank you very much. What we will do is we have a very, very interesting panel team here between all four of us, and I'll request Jaspreet to join us in the session and give his perspective and answer the questions as well. And between the four of us, I would also request, I know Varun introduce us very briefly as we go through, request all my fellow colleagues here to talk a little about the business they are in, personally, what they're doing in the business, because it will be very relevant to the conversation. To start with, Pramila is how Varun introduced me, but I always introduce myself as a very, very proud Zensarian. That's the company I worked for 20 years with the company, seen the beautiful growth journey of Zensar, had tremendous joy in building the company to what it is today. So we are a tech company, work for global customers across the globe, all the key sectors: manufacturing, high-tech, retail, consumer services, banking, insurance. And as you can imagine, the pandemic had an impact on all these businesses to different extents. But in fact, I'll take a few minutes to talk about what's been the journey of Zensar and several such tech companies. In fact, this whole value creation itself has gone through a lot of transformation in the last several years for many of us. Gone are the days where a service provider is measured by what you bring to the table in terms of time, cost, and quality. That is out of the window now. Nobody wants to engage a vendor because you're the cheapest, or you're the fastest, or you just give the best quality goods. From there, it went to the phase 2 of really measuring value, which was more about, hey, are you delivering business value to me? Are you delivering business impact to me? Are you helping me improve maybe my sales cycle, improve my wallet share? So customers were more looking at how can service providers help them in their own business goals. And that's the journey we were all going in. And then this 2020 happened, and I'm sure Jaspreet called out on the last slide. If you ask me personally, I'm happy it happened in my lifetime. If this has done something, it has forced me to completely, break some molds in my own mind, change what I believed in was not possible, and have forced me to reinvent myself. In a way, I think 2020 will go down in the history, all kinds of histories for all of us. a year we'll all live to talk about to the next generations, whether it's history of nations, histories of communities, of governments, of industries, of people, of education. It's changed a lot of things. For us in the industry that we are in, I want to talk about two things that we saw changing. And digital technology, of course, has become a big catalyst for driving transformation for several years now. I mean, we talk about digital, we've been talking about it for the last 10 years now. Digital sits in every company's agenda and strategy. However, if, like I said, in the past, it was about business impact and transformation, I think three keywords became extremely important for us in the last 1 year, which was agility. I think it required all of us to change and press the reset button and see how quickly we can turn the direction of the company, redo what our strategies were. And it had to be done. And we always believe agility comes at, scale and agility are mutually exclusive. The bigger you are, the larger you are, the less agile you are is what, our basic science tells us. But however, that was again challenging. Even if you're big, how quickly can you, realign and become an agile company? The second important word we all learned is resilience, invaluable trait for a company to be resilient. And today we are like what Jaspreet talked about, antibodies. How do we build these antibodies? But today it is COVID. None of us knew what this word meant maybe 15 months back. And we don't know what the next virus is and where is it, in what form will it come. But resilience has become the most valued. So as we went through this journey, that's the only big thing that customers looked at for us to say, how do you help us? Two very simple examples, but I think they're very, very profound examples. We still work for a global company. They were a complete online florist. They were only delivering flowers to their customers for various occasions around the regions where they operate. Yes, they had a digital channel. They were only 100% online. They didn't have any. Now we see ferns and petals, a lot of those kind of service providers in India. So they were doing 100% online flowers, and suddenly this hit them. But they had invested in digital because they were using a digital channel. And overnight, just in 3 days, that is 72 hours, our team worked with them to completely change the channel to start delivering groceries on the same channel, because they had a distribution network. They had their vans, they had refrigeration because they were delivering flowers. But they were just, I think in the pandemic, they wanted food to be delivered to their homes, and they could do without flowers for some time. So they had to very quickly tie up with grocery outlets. They had the distribution network. We had to go and tweak their entire online e-commerce sites to bring the inventory from flowers to groceries, allow residents to buy groceries online and have it delivered. And I think the value there was not about maybe 10 people working for 3 days and delivering an online channel. The value there was completely how this company became relevant and became a part of really addressing what the common people were really struggling with. That I saw, again, their technology, thanks to the investment they have done in digital earlier, that allowed them to completely change how they could use their network. Another very interesting example, we work for one of the world's largest auctioning company. So this company is based in the US. They conduct, if all of us have seen Hollywood movies, you'll have these huge auction halls, tall ceilings, and there's a guy with a hammer, and then somebody is raising a card, and millions of dollars worth paintings and great, artifacts get sold. And this was this company, and they had a huge auction house right in New York City. And then the COVID happened, and they didn't know what to do. So they said, okay, and they were known for the auction experience. People come in, you touch and feel a piece of art, you get to see it, then you're willing to put your $1 million on it. And overnight, we had to work with them and saying, okay, guys, that's it. So we have to run the next auction on schedule and not change it. They got about 4 months to work with us to how do you give the same immersive experience for somebody who's coming to bid and buy when you can't touch and feel. I'm not going to put $10 million there to buy a flower vase that I can't see, no matter how well you describe it. So we had to work with them to bring the AR, VR, the whole digital experience to give them the same immersive experience. And interestingly, they did an auction, global auction in 6 different cities, starting from Hong Kong to London to Paris to New York to San Francisco, various time zones. And they've had the highest sale ever in their history of auction. Again, rather than being overwhelmed by technology, by the situation, they decided, how do I turn this around and make it a new business model? In all of these areas, the thing that like I'm calling out, for us, we saw technology give agility and speed both to our customers. And in the space that we are in technology, we realized these two have really changed. So as we go along, that's changed the way they look at business, the way we work on solutions. But that's from our space. What will be really interesting is to hear again, Mr. Kalsi, from your world is very different from mine. And how have you seen this happening in your industry? Like Jaspreet called out, it would have been a big challenge and also maybe once in a generation opportunity for you also to change the way you look at your stakeholders. So we'd like to hear your insights, and we will come back to talk about the other questions.
Well, once again, very good afternoon to all of you and all our audience. I would like to first introduce myself. I have been working with Maruti Suzuki for now almost 37 years. And I take pride in the fact that when I joined, we used to make 10 cars a day to a situation today when we make 7,000 cars a day. So that's the kind of journey we have gone through. And I have been a part of this journey. I can proudly say that. And today, if we see on the road, every second vehicle that you see is from Maruti Suzuki. We still retain our 50% market share in spite of stiff competition. I have worked in various areas. In fact, I am an engineer by education. And I have worked in quality assurance, production, vehicle inspection, and almost 20 years I have worked in the corporate office. I'm responsible for a couple of startups in Maruti Suzuki, Maruti Insurance, our subsidiary, where I happen to be the chairman of this company, then Maruti Finance, True Value, and Maruti Driving Training Schools. So from concept to execution, I was at the helm of affairs. And I have been head of sales at a national level and head of marketing and sales, and executive director marketing, sales, logistics, and aftermarket parts. And my current role is as a member executive board, strategic in nature, where I look after the vertical comprising of marketing, sales, parts, logistics, international marketing. So that's briefly my profile and my introduction. Having said that, I would like to say that automobile business is a very, very complex business. And it comprises of supply chains running across the globe, from China to US, all the way. And then there are multiple holders. We have stakeholders in the form of, say, our suppliers, who, at the back end have their own tier 2, tier 3 suppliers or sub-vendors, we call them. And on the front side, we have our dealers. And then we have other stakeholders like our logistics partners. Then, of course, we have our employees, our customers. It's a very complex value chain. And as the news of coronavirus spread and entire world came to a standstill, it was a big shock for everyone. And more so for us because managing the operations with that kind of situation was an extremely challenging situation. And I would like to divide it in, say, four phases. The first phase was that of a shock as we came face to face with the situation. And then second phase was that, okay, understanding the realities, the then realities, and then designing the, say, strategies, designing the action plans to face those situations. And third phase was how we ensure the sustainability of what we have done. And then fourth phase, I would like to say, is that we are going through now, where what are the lessons that we have learned and how to hold those gains. All that is very, very important. So in the first phase, I think it was very important for the leadership to show an extreme sense of candor and humility, because the situation that all of us came across was totally unforeseen There was no, precedent on this, and you could not refer back to any case studies that, okay, this has happened, so how we can handle it. So leadership at that point of time had to show an extreme sense of humility in terms of, understanding each and every person's viewpoint, in terms of understanding what is happening at the ground level and what can be done, and maybe trying to build a scenario in a fast forward mode, coming back to present again, and then taking actions based on that. Just to give an example of the kind of situation we were in, say there was lockdown. We have close to, say, 2,500 sales outlets. So they were in various zones. And as the lockdown was opening gradually, many of them were still in the lockdown zones and in the red zones, in the hotspot zones. Likewise, our service workshops, close to 4,000 service workshops spread across the country. Again, they were in different time, zones in terms of, say, hotspot zones or normal zones. Then there were suppliers. The suppliers are again spread all across the country, and of course beyond the country also. But within the country, again, it was a challenge to see that their suppliers, their sub vendors, they are all putting up an integrated and consolidated approach to ensure that there are no shortages. So in this kind of a situation, the candor is very important, that honestly we communicate with everyone, with all the stakeholders, the real situation, because everyone is keen to know what is happening, what is going to be next, what is going to happen tomorrow. So talking to them and then also sharing all the communications with them, that what is it that we are doing, is very important. Then another point was that putting human beings first, putting our employees first, putting our customers first, putting our dealers first, putting our vendors first, suppliers first, and then the business or the finance. So financials had to take a back seat, and we had to ensure that the safety of our people is the paramount importance. And under a situation where we had to maintain 6 feet distance, we had to maintain the discipline of masks. We had to maintain the discipline of sanitization of our workplace, of our vehicles, of our plant, machinery, equipment. Again, it was a big challenge, but this was done on a daily basis, monitoring and then taking actions every day, reviewing those actions and adding more actions to that, adding more intensity to those actions. We put thermal scanners at our gates, and we put special sanitization equipment for the vehicles of our employees, be it two-wheelers, be it cars, be it the trucks which were transporting components to our plant, and then the customers. Again, we had to go digital here. Customers' concern was that, okay, when he visits the showroom, will it be safe? So our on a digital platform to our customers was that majority of the activities that a customer does at the showroom, we were able to take it on the digital platforms, and including the finance, including a virtual visit to the showroom, a virtual understanding of the vehicle, its features, a two-way interaction with our dealer sales executives and relationship managers. So much so that out of, say, 26 touch points that a customer has when he buys a car, say 24 were converted into digital. So even the delivery point, we decided that if a customer feels comfortable, we will deliver it at his home, and our team would be wearing the PPE suits and masks, and the entire vehicle would be re-sterilized and re-sanitized before the keys are handed over to the customer. So to that extent, we had to look at our sales processes, and this was an evolutionary process. It's not that just over a few days the whole thing evolved. Likewise, the customers who had vehicles, their vehicles were due for service, their warranty was expiring, so we extended the warranty period. We ensured that if a customer wants the vehicle to be serviced, we will pick up the vehicle from his home, get it serviced, and then deliver it back at his doorstep. So on that front, again, we took a lot of countermeasures. And the people who were doing all this, their safety, as I mentioned, was again very, very important. And that was our top priority. And apart from this, the working culture, it had a drastic change. We could develop a hybrid model where people who could work from home, they were allowed to work from home, while physically we have to manufacture the vehicles. So a large chunk of our people had to come to the plant to produce the cars physically. But we did a good, segregation where, say, our engineering team could work from home. So we provided them all the support and infrastructure right at their home. Our projects team could work from home. Our sales people, they could avoid visiting the dealer showrooms and even our regional offices. They could work from home, interact with the dealers, solve their problems. Likewise, say our warehouse, which had to supply parts, the entire process was put on digital platform. And of course, the efficiencies also improved with that. So that was the first phase, I would like to say. And I think it answers your this thing question. So I'll wait for my turn for the second phase and second round of questions. So this is how we immediately responded to the situation, and then I'll come to subsequently what were the gains and how we are.
Out and is about the whole empathy and candor. And I'm sure through this last 1 year, the whole concept of partnership, employee care, organization culture, values, all these really got tested. And that really, I mean, the year has shown us what does it mean to stand up for your values? What does it mean when you say you have win-win partnership with your customers? How do you still, put empathy at the center of everything else? Forget about contracts, forget about rules. And it is people over policies. It is customers over contracts. And then that became a learning, and I'm sure both you and Raju in your roles had a huge role to play to make sure we're not compromising on the values even as we deal with the dilemmas. So with that, I would request Raju to please share. I think your CIPLA, we're really, really proud of the role that you and your organization played. It is far beyond the charter of an organization. Very, very proud, and I know you were center stage to how you helped your employees, your your end customers, all of us, our families and our societies to get through this. Raju, very, very keen to hear about, what you went through and what's been your experiences.
Sure. Thank you, Pramila, and thank you to all the fellow participants for sharing your views. I would like to really take away something that Jaspreet has shared about COVID, and I really resonate with the gray swan part of it, and I'll tell you why in a short while. I truly resonate with that. Just a very quick introduction. I think very proud to be a CIPLAite. I think we are one of the very key players of being the pharmacy to the world. And with our 85 plus years of legacy in the country, I think as a company, we have always lived true to our purpose, which is caring for life. We did that a decade and a half ago when we were crusading against HIV. And this time again, the world actually knocked and gave the opportunity to CIPLA to again serve the patients. And I think we did true to our calling and true to our purpose. I think hats off to all the CIPLAites who actually came together. One of the truly humbling experience for me was that, even if a doctor is the most versatile doctor, he or she can't do anything if they don't have the required medicines, So pharma is such an integral part of caring. And what I would share with you in my next couple of minutes is what has been the journey transition and how we as a company have lived through it, and some learnings and experiences that we have gained and how you could benefit from it. So first, one of the biggest learning and wake-up call for us is that when the rules of the game change, then history becomes irrelevant. And this was truly experienced by all of us in this particular phase, right? None of us were prepared. There was no rule book, no guide book to do certain things. But I think this COVID pandemic has given many examples, and I'll share one by one what it really did for us. One is a huge amount of collaboration. We had a COVID task force that actually got together. And Pramila, you talked about agility. I think agility was something that actually helped us sail through. Overnight, our IT team actually got together to make all of us tech enabled and to operate from home. And we were one of the first to declare work from home even before the PMO's office announced it, because we said, that's what we have to do. Second thing, that most of our population, almost 90 to 95% of our population, working population, works out of our sites, and they work out of our R&D labs. Okay. And they had to show up for work. So those initial 2-3 months of actually helping them alleviate their fear and come to work was quite an experience, because we were actually encouraging the parents to send their children to come to work, and we were reassuring them about their safety. You will recall that even the government, for them, it was so difficult, to just be ready, and the administrative infrastructure was not ready to cope with these the passes and permits and all of that. So I think all the teams really worked together to navigate through it so that people could come to work, and that was important. Now let me give you some small instances which tells us how we have to be mindful. This was the month of April, May, and in the interior parts of India, especially the Madhya Pradesh, we have a site somewhere in Indore. It can get extremely hot. Okay, imagine people have to actually stand in before they enter the work. They have to have temperature tested, and the sanitization, all the safety protocols had to be followed, and people were falling sick because they had to stand in the sun, right? And that's how the IT team, within a very short time, created a particular app that before you leave the home, just fill up those questions which are required. And that app was so helpful to the people. Then again, talking of collaboration, that this app, once we developed and it was working really well for us, we actually shared it with the other companies. We were part of a pharma alliance company, so lots of sharing was happening around that time. So something like that happened. Now let me give you another example of collaboration. When the cases of COVID were actually on the rise, and employees wanted, especially places in Bombay where spaces are very small, quarantine facilities for our employees is not possible. So what a wonderful partnership we had with Mahindra and Mahindra to set up quarantine centers for our employees. So this was another great example where two different companies can come together, again in the interest of helping employees and their families. Very, very good partnership, and lots of learning and sharing. I think this was something where the world was pouring their hearts out to say, okay, how can we really help? There were hundreds and thousands of examples I can give you where anyone and everybody, they just had to know that somebody is working in Cipla, and they would get a call that, I need this medicine. I think the fastest delivery of remdesivir development was done in Cipla in a very record time. And that was a really life-saving drug at that time for a lot of people who were suffering. And people would get calls anytime. There were also instances which I heard that if our stock of remdesivir was not there, our MRs have actually gone to a competition to take their products so that it can be delivered. So this is where the world can actually come together. And there are many stories like that I can share with you. Rising to the need of the occasion, the fastest, and again coming to your agility thing, the fastest product launch that ever could have happened in the history of Cipla was the Sip Hand sanitizer. Right from product conceptualization to delivery, it only took 4.5 days. The 5th day, our product was there in the market, because again, this was something that was so much required. You remember, we were all running helter-skelter to get sanitizers. Okay, so this is how the teams actually come together to really address the need of the hour, and that was really beautiful examples. Now coming to the different business model, thousands of doctors were connected over the virtual medium, and through hundreds of webinars and connects that were held. And this was only possible because everyone adopted to the new way of doing. Today, when I look at this NHRDN conference from the Delhi chapter, can you imagine, we have almost 700-800 people here on the call. if if it would be last year, imagine 800 or 900 of us would have had to travel to Delhi and we would be speaking there. So how quickly all of us have adapted to this change and, working around it. Now, let me tell you something about HR policies, because again, HR has had to play a huge role, and some of my HR colleagues are there on this call as well. I think what was very, very important for us is to provide them the insurance cover to make sure that people are at ease and they're not at any, how they are actually going to be working out. So how do you really help people? In CIPLA, we had a policy until last year where employees could have 2 days of work from home. Okay. And that was there as part of the policy. Today, when I look at it, I'm amazed because that policy has been turned over its head. Now we say that only 2 days you are allowed to come to work from office. All other days you have to work, because we have really taken work from home like fish takes to water. And this is something that is really different for us, because our offices are now engagement centers. Because as you said, it's been like a wave. People were suddenly shocked. They started enjoying work from home because it saved them 3 or 4 hours of travel every day. But then working from home with your children or wife or, your aging parents, it became very difficult. So people wanted a break and wanted to come back. So what we have done is we've taken a hybrid model and says, look, if you have a concern, you cannot work from home, you are definitely welcome to step into office. But otherwise, you need to have a very justifiable reason to come to work. And that's how we are approaching this whole situation. And it's really interesting to see how things are evolving, and mindsets have to change. So I can just go on and on. Actually, each one of us can write a book, but I think it's been a great, and that's why I would say, Jaspreet, this is really a gray swan, because a lot of things that we would have just talked to people about, it wouldn't have happened. But this has just accelerated, as Pramila said, it has accelerated so much of change. So I would take a pause here and would welcome any questions from the audience.
Thank you very much, Raju. Thank you very much. I think it's really touching to see all the stories you've talked about and what immense difference it's made for all of us to help us to get through. 2 things that stood out as you were talking. You talked about collaboration. To me, again, I think, Raju, it goes back to talk about eventually it is ecosystems that succeed, ecosystems that will win wars like this. And this whole power of interdependency, when we all come together, I think that's where the magic happens. To me, the new normal is new benchmarks. You talk about how in 4.5 days you did something which you never did. That means we always had it in us to do it. It's a new benchmark. The fact that the vaccine is out, I mean, imagine in 12 months, we are talking about vaccines which people didn't even think about. You started thinking about it, it went through the trials, now people are getting the vaccination. I don't think ever in the history, any vaccination which had this kind of a relevance for a pandemic came out this fast. So I think it's just testing our old molds of what agility got redefined, speed got redefined, interdependency got redefined, and I'm sure it's going to have a lasting impact. I'm conscious of the time, and I do really want to make sure we get the audience to get some time with us. So we will just take about 9-10 minutes again to very quickly, 2 minutes each, to talk about I think what we said. What were the challenges in doing this while we braved it and we've done something? Is it sustainable? Will some of these things go back to the old way once we all get vaccinated, we get immunity? Or some of these are changes for the good? So just going back to talking about what I see a big change. For us, we are a tech company. Yes, overnight we had to move 10,000 Zensarians globally to their homes. It was an easier task for us because we were anyway tech. Many of them were already remotely able to work. But what we did not realize is how difficult it's going to be for some of these Zensarians to do it. Only after 2-3 months into this system, they came back to us saying, hey, I live in a small home in Bombay with 10 people in my family. Right? If you're going to ask me to come on a video and be online all the time, I don't have the privacy in my home. Right? And especially the millennials, the junior guys who came in, they were living with families, they were bachelors, they were sharing apartments, and suddenly the world changed. So you had a home where, parents and kids all are sitting in different rooms and doing this on. We were not prepared for it. That is one. Second is a social isolation. The big thing, we are still finding answers to that is, today somebody is joining the company, getting hired remotely. How do you teach them the culture of the company? How do you create the emotional stickiness? What is the pride of being a Zensarian if you've never met your colleagues, never seen your workforce? And those are, I think, long-term changes. And again, HR and business, all of us will have to partner to figure out. This culture is experienced. Culture can't be taught through slidewares and other areas. And if you socially, if you can't spend time together, how do we deal with keeping the intact, the culture and the values intact is something that we're really dealing with in the company. We're trying to understand it. Because like you said, when life comes back, I think we're going to be somewhere in the middle. It is not true that we will forever remain 100% remote, nor will it go back to 100%, like you said, being workplace and taking some 2 days in a month or 15 days to be working from home. So that, where will the new normal land, and how will we deal with the culture and the deeper issues which come with social distancing and not having, will we develop social skills? The young generation that's coming into the workforce, do they know what it is to work as a team in a crisis? Be there for each other. Those are things which I guess we will learn. So with that, Kalsi, it will be interesting to see what are the challenges. Again, if you just take a couple of minutes to talk about what challenges, what new fundamental shifts you are making in your organizations to deal with the new normal, it will be, I think, interesting to hear from you. I think you're on remote, Kalsi. Can you hear us?
The little symbol on the right with it shows, I think his network has a bit of a problem.
Okay, while he comes back, Raju, it will be good to hear from you on how you're dealing with the challenges. We'll wait for him to join us back.
Yeah. So I think, Pramila, you're absolutely right. There are cases where, people cannot work from home. And also this concern in terms of how does culture get, transmitted. Ours is a very different situation because we also have, as I said, 90% of my organization actually has to work on site. So what are we talking about in terms of a cultural dent? We're talking about some 3,000 people from a 25,000 workforce. And obviously, that is a very small number compared to the larger numbers that we're talking about. But having said that, I think people who join new in the company, and you're absolutely right, how do they get assimilated in the culture? And that's the reason why the new normal would be somewhere in between in terms of a hybrid model, because we are all social beings and we also like to be connected. To be honest with you, I've had the opportunity to visit office in the last 1 or 2 weeks a couple of times, and I really liked it, because working from home had really got to me. And the very fact that you work from home, there is no boundary. You continue to work, all the number of hours. So that change really, really helps you because it gives you a rhythm. And that's what we'll have to help people to understand. But I still see some mindsets that one has to address with, because today we are actually operating in a very different model. We have to book our spaces. We have also again created an app where you have to book your spaces in advance, and if there is, because of 30% attendance that we have as a norm by the government in compliance to that, so if you are full of 30%, there is a possibility you will not get to work. So this is something that we have to help people understand, and how to work with teams, and how to stay connected. It's not very easy to be staying glued to your laptop screens, because it's not very healthy also over a period of time. So getting over this part will really be the challenge. What will be the new ways of working? But I can tell you for sure, our life is never going to go back to the way it was in the 2020s, where we had early 2020, the Feb, where we could all go to work. It is going to be somewhere in between. That is there for sure.
Yeah, completely agree with you, Raju, that the new normal is going to be something not like the old, but not like what's happening now. We will all settle in. Kalsi is still not back on the call. I think he's here now. Can you hear us?
I'm back. I'm back now. I'm
Yes.
back. I can hear you now.
Yeah, so we wanted to just hear from you, Kalsi, on the challenges you have faced in dealing with the current situation, and how has it fundamentally changed the way you operate, you engage, or you look at business?
One of the most important challenge was, people challenge, giving them a confidence that, okay, they have to come to the workplace and we are there behind them to take care of their safety. So we had meetings with our, union representatives, talk to them, took them around the plant that what countermeasures have been taken, how we have put shields and screens and various operations, so that from one station to another station of the operations assembly line, the people are this thing isolated from the other person. Also, we put cameras at different locations, or most of the locations, where we could identify the movement of the people, that they don't cross the say limit of 6 feet distance. And we set up a very close tracking system about the movement of the employees. We also organized their food in a highly sanitized environment. And apart from this, if something goes wrong, we had booked special beds in all the nearby big hospitals in Gurgaon as well as in Delhi, which were reserved for our people. And also we set up certain quarantine centers. The people had to file every day their health report, whether they have traveled this thing out of Delhi, or they are having any temperature, giddiness, any of those symptoms, they had to mention in that. And in case any answer to any one of those was yes, their say template would turn red, and we will ask them not to come to the office for say 7 days. Or if somebody is detected with COVID, we will see, okay, how many people he came in contact with, or he came this thing closer to say less than 6 feet distance. So we put different categories, that high risk persons, medium risk persons, low risk persons, and we put them on quarantine. And we also had a backup manpower of around say 600, 700 people. At any given point of time, there used to be 300 to 400 people in quarantine because of this suspect, low risk, medium risk, or high risk category. And there would be another team of people who would be working there. So this was one challenge. Our next challenge was about the financials, managing the financials of our dealers, our suppliers. As rightly said earlier by you, Pramila, that and with Ms. Raju Mistry also, that people over policies, people over contracts, we put aside those contracts, and we ensured that immediate payments were suppliers, immediate payments were made to our dealers. Any sort of pending incentive payments, those were made. Some of the incentive payments were rather preponed, so that their financials are run appropriately and their manpower also does not get impacted adversely on account of any say financial constraints. We allowed our dealers to come to smaller setups than what were recommended as per the policy, so that their lease rentals go down drastically, their air conditioning costs go down drastically. So these are many challenges, in fact, and we used to have a meeting every day. As I mentioned, that keeping your eyes, ears close to the ground is very important. Our managing director used to chair that meeting continuously for 6 months. Every day at 9:30, he would be holding a web meeting with a team of about 30 core officials. He will simply be listening, and people would be coming out with ideas, and there would be spot decisions within those 2 hours in the early morning. So that's how we this thing came face to face with those challenges and took countermeasures. And it was an ongoing activity for first 6 months till the time the operations stabilized.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Kalsi. I guess what you just mentioned towards the end, is almost like how we run projects, right? A daily stand-up meeting, a daily scrum meeting, because nobody knew you will have a new situation. You don't have any rule book or a playbook to say, what do you do with this? And there are no answers. We had to, innovate as we go along. For example, after we went through this, we have now launched a work from anywhere model, where when we are hiring ZSRians, it doesn't matter they're in a town, they're in a tier 3 city. Earlier, we never had access to those talent pools. We wanted people to come and join us in our centers, Pune, Bangalore, Hyderabad. Now we said, doesn't matter where you are, just join us and work remotely. In fact, a lot of talent pools, especially women professionals, several of them who have walked out of the workforce because they went to cities, they had to move because of marriage or the spouse moving there, and they didn't want to move back to the big cities where most of our development centers are. Or several of the other thing is the whole gig workforce. Now we're also not looking that everybody has to join us full time and give us 8 hours a day. So the flexibility of remote, if you only have 4 hours that you want to really work for, that has really opened up a whole new talent model for Zensar itself, and I'm sure it's for the entire industry. So Jaspreet, wanted to kind of hear from you. You've heard all of us different industries. You've been there with Mahindra. You've seen. In fact, it's very interesting when we thought the first industry that will get disrupted is the whole automobile and the airlines and the travel thing, because everybody was indoors. But now I just see that industry has come back with a bang, and it's, I think, in a high growth curve again. Interesting to see. It really surprised all of us, and we're seeing it for all the industries there. Anything, your thoughts that you want to share with us, Jaspreet?
Sure. Thank you very much, Pramila. So 3-4 things. I've been hearing, all of you talking about how things will change. Some things will change, some things will go back, but we are not entirely going to go back to where we were. And I agree with you. I now work with maybe close to a dozen companies across different industries. Not only in India, 6 months of a year, I actually am based out of Cambridge in the UK. And, so it gives me an interesting vantage point to see how, even beyond India, how some of these different countries and companies are reacting to this disruption. So I think what I would want to talk about are very quickly 5 things. I think work from home, I absolutely agree, is not going to be 100% work from home, but neither is it going to be 100% WFO, which is work from office. Okay, and I think you use the word work from anywhere. I think that's what it's going to move to, where anywhere is not only different cities, like you mentioned, but also anywhere means home, office, co-working space, maybe a coffee shop. Because I think the mindsets have changed to say that, okay, fine, like Ms. Mistry said, instead of 2 days work from home, it will become 2 days work from office. But it might not necessarily be home, because everyone doesn't have homes. In fact, I see, a lot of companies now experimenting with having bunch of small offices in a city rather than one big, large office. And rather than investing in these bunch of small offices, this is the rebirth of the co-working spaces, where they will kind of move to become these smaller offices for companies. And so the commute times, etc. Look, not all of us are fortunate, like most of us, we have large homes, etc. People still need to get out of their cramped homes and work out of anywhere, but that not necessarily be this large central office. So work from anywhere, and this is something which, frankly, I'm seeing across the world. Number 1. Number 2, I think decentralization will continue. This push that has been given to disaggregation or decentralization, whether it be in work, whether it be in retail, whether it be in healthcare, we'll be far more comfortable doing our first appointment for a non-serious health issue online. Okay, rather than going to a doctor and getting infected there, to a hospital and getting infected. And so I think that has also changed. Similarly for education, in fact, the flip side is that it has brought to the fore this massive digital divide about people who have digital access and do not. And all of these industries will decentralize to some extent, not to the extent which was forced upon us during the pandemic, but it will become a hybrid, depending on industry, depending on country, which side it is, but it will. Number 3, that say that it takes 22 days to form a habit, 66 days to make that a behavior. We have been under lockdowns for more than 66 days. And so a bunch of things which we have learned new way to do things. We don't like wearing, many of us might not like wearing formal clothes anymore, look at me. Okay, or, commutes, travel, business travel, not always necessary. Leisure travel will be there, but business travel will not come back the way it is. And so a lot of these habits change, and therefore, from a business angle, customer journeys have changed. And these new customer journeys will mean that companies will have to create new kind of offerings and products or tweak their current ones to meet this new customer journey. So I think that's number 3. Number 4, Haresh Chawla, a friend and a great commentator on digital and technology in this country, said that from after COVID, there will be 2 kinds of companies, the digital and the dying. And frankly, that's true. However, hyperbolic it sounds, it's true, because every single company across the world, across industry, large, across size, across sector, is saying that, look, what can they do to become more digital, more remote, so that such disruptions do not. And I think this impetus to digital transformation, COVID becomes the chief digital officer of the company in many ways. And, that's what is going to happen. And finally, and last, is the mindset change. Okay, and, it's been the subtext of everything that you've been saying about how, as Mr. Kalsi said, people before financials. Hopefully, some of that continues even in normal times. Okay, we've talked about 2 days versus 2 days. And, everything that you've been saying, this massive push to us has resulted in a mindset change. And I think some of that mindset change for the good will continue in terms of finding purpose. Mr. Mistry, Cipla has been amazing in terms of actually being one of the companies which has, always worked for a purpose. And, this gave them even more of an impetus to do so. And multiple other mindset changes vis-a-vis working from home, vis-a-vis delegation, etc. So these 5 things, I think, will still change, not to the other extreme, but to somewhere in the continuum.
Thank you, Jaspreet. Again, very valuable insight. Like you said, the subtext here that all of us talked about is there is an innate, capability and ability in enterprises, individuals and teams to really survive. And I sometimes wonder, right? It's the human spirit. If you look at the whole world came together to fight the COVID, the virus. The virus knew no and still does not know nationality, does not know race, does not understand gender, does not understand class. It's not left anybody behind. I think the only way we've all across the world been able to get to where we are because everybody came together for a common purpose. It became one enemy for the whole, and that I think is a history of the world. It's a human spirit of this whole spirit of fighting and getting out and then getting up there and going out. I'm sure that's what will get us through this. So with that, we will just, Varun, we will close the session. Once again, I would want to thank everybody on the panel, Jaspreet, Kalsi, Raju, all of you for bringing in your perspectives, sharing this, and and I'm sure we get through this. We're coming out stronger, more agile, more empathetic, more sensitive, and more ready for whatever the world throws at us going forward.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely, thank you very much, all. It is a fantabulous session, and sincere thanks to all our speakers for sharing such a wonderful insight. And special thanks to all our audience for having connected and throughout the session. Definitely, pandemic has increased the emphasis on the human connect. We will take a leave now. Thank you, Raju ma'am. Thank you, Kalsi sir, Jaspreet sir, and Pramila sir. Mercy, over to you.
Thank you, Varun. So participants, you have a very exciting opportunity to join our speakers on stage and ask them a question directly. So to be able to do that, you just have to raise your hand virtually, of course. So you can see that raise hand icon there. Please click on it and I'll hand over the mic to you and you'll be able to join us on stage. Okay, so while we get people to raise their hands, I think we can take some questions from the Q&A feed. So there's one question here about data privacy. So don't you think data privacy and confidentiality will become an issue in the long run with work from home model? Example, situations like spouses working for competitor companies. So anybody on the panel can take up this question, please.
Yeah, let me try and answer that, Mercy. It is true. Like I said, this is something that was never there in the rule book, that you and your spouse will sit next to each other and work for competing companies. My answer on the lighter side is, even without working from home, if you and your spouse are working for competitive companies, you anyway have a problem. You can share that. You could have shared it even before the pandemic. Having said that, the bigger issue that we really have is customers who work, we work for several, say, confidential data. We have access to it. We look at customers in banking, financial services. We have access to their healthcare information because they're maintaining the IT systems, right? We are maintaining the databases. This always has been, I think, one of the key concerns about data privacy when you outsource work. But when we do work in a contained environment like an offshore center, an office, or a campus, there are a lot of those security standards in the networks being isolated, access control of who gets into a floor, who gets access to data. So the first few weeks of when people went remote was to make sure that is not compromised. So all equipment that employees took home had to be first tested by the IT teams to make sure you have all the security protections, all the firewalls in place, all the antiviruses in place before people can go in. And we had to first discuss with the customer saying, this is how remote things will work, and then giving access only based on a role for a certain period of time. So all of those checks and balances, today the technology for ensuring data is securely shared or this exists. So I think it is not a unique problem in terms of spouses and all that, but yes, in many cases, if the people who are working remote are in places where you're not able to remotely make their equipment secure, it is a challenge for all of us, and companies are taking an extra care to make sure confidentiality is not compromised.
Thank you, Ms. Pramila.
Yeah, any question we have?
So the first, yes, we had one question, and it was directed to Mr. Raju, but it's an interesting one. So since he's not here, anybody on the panel can pick it up.
So Mr.
It's around how
on phone. So if anything he want to answer, he can answer from my channel.
Buy-in for some of that HRs would like to follow in their organization. So, for example, the question is posted like this: I know at Cipla a lot of innovative and great places to work practices are followed 2019 and 18 during Deepavali and etc. So, if I'm correct, how did business agree to this?
Yeah, thank you.
It's about getting business buy-in for some of the best practices that you'd like to follow in the organization, Mr. Kalsi.
Sorry?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes, please.
Okay. So the question goes like this. So for all the best practices that, we'd like the organization to take up, what is the best way to get business buy-in for it, leadership buy-in?
Well, the most important thing here is that, this thing first we have to, demonstrate it in a pilot fashion. And then see the gains, and then maybe the proliferation or scaling up becomes very important. See, one example here would be that we have an annual business meet with our dealers, and which was due in the month of May, and because of COVID we could not do it, so we had to defer it, postpone it. But subsequently we had to get back to our CEO and talk to him that it is very important during these tough times that we communicate with our, say, channel partners, because everyone is, in a state of anxiety because of the uncertainty of the business situation. So it was discussed in detail, and then a small meeting with a particular region was done earlier. And, after that meeting, it was observed that certainly, that kind of a meeting was taken in a very positive way, and there was a big, a boost in the morale and motivation of those channel partners. So then we, this thing held another large-scale meeting with our entire network at an all India level. So I think demonstrating the, say, gains is very important before we scale it up and, do the proliferation of any best practices. That's very important.
Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Kalsi. So we have Mr. Ravi who's raised his hand. So I'd like to invite him on the stage. So Ravi, I'm going to hand the mic to you. You'll be able to see that icon to accept it, and you'll be coming on stage with us. So here you go. Mr. Ravi Prasad. Yeah, he's here.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes, Ravi.
Clearly. Please go ahead and ask your question.
So, my question is addressed to Raju. It was a very interesting sharing of experiences. How did they manage, particularly the workforce, and how did they care about their welfare and well-being? So one question, it's a twofold question. One relating to the operations, because pharma industry depends to a large extent on import of intermediaries and chemicals from China. And obviously that impacted the pharma industry, according to me, in a great way. So how did you manage that? And secondly, did it affect the workforce in terms of downsizing or relocation or any of that sort?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Ravi. Those are very interesting questions. One is, I think, when this whole epidemic was in its infancy, I would say, this was somewhere in October, November, when we were just hearing that China is going through something like that. I would attribute this foresight and preparedness of our CEO, Umang, who actually we have a monthly connect, he started asking this question. So I think for Cipla, what worked very well is that we had started our planning processes, and our procurement teams and our supply chain teams are fully geared. So thank God, and knock on wood that we did not face any issues around API or raw material requirements for this. So that's the reason, one of the reasons why we were able to manage it for this thing. So therefore, the learning is that you always have to anticipate and plan much ahead of time, and that worked well for us. What was your second question? It was about
did it affect the workforce?
Oh yeah. No. We did not actually. What we did notice is that during the COVID time, our attrition had come down at the lowest ever levels, and that was very good for us because we had all the workforce that was there, so we never had to lay off anyone or retrench anyone, and our attrition levels were also low. We had to really double up our production because it was very, very important, and fewer people were coming to work because of the fear factor. So for us, all of it add together, we were able to manufacture our medicines in time, and we never had to undertake any of those measures.
Thank you very much. Great efforts from Cipla.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions, Mercy, or we can end the session? Mercy, are you there?
Mercy, you're on mute.
Do we have time for one last question?
Sure. We'll make it quick.
Speakers, it's your choice.
So where we don't see the question.
Best initiative. Sure, I'll read it out for you. The best initiatives of engaging with remote associate and enhanced retention in tech companies, and hope the focus will remain on health and happiness of teams.
Yeah. So in fact, I will go back to what Kalsi talked about. How do you make something a best practice now or next practice? For example, we had a challenge, like I said, we work from anywhere. We had young Zensarians joining us from towns and tier 2, tier 3 cities. And we said, how do you give them the culture of Zensar? So our HR team came up with a very innovative way. So through their trainings, what we did is 1 day in the week, 2 hours, get your family on the call. So we had these youngsters in this session. They had their parents, grandparents, siblings, pets come on to the session. And when we interacted with them, I think that created such an emotional bond for us, which we would have never done if we had a physical campus. I don't think somebody would have come from Ahmedabad or Bhopal or Indore, or the families would have ever seen the Zensar campus or known who are we as a team. So getting the leadership and again technology, all of us could join, interact with the parents. That's become a new normal that we will do it even when things go back to normal. The second big thing is we used to have this massive annual awards function, right? A very starry night, all the excellence awards, Zensarians would get rewarded. And it would always be done in one of our campuses, Pune or elsewhere. And it's always just Zensarians who would come on the stage and take their, awards. We changed the whole paradigm. I said, here is a challenge and here is also the biggest opportunity. We actually shipped the trophies to their homes around the globe, wherever people were from our local centers. And it was given it was delivered to the spouse or the partner or the parents, whoever the case was, and it was kept confidential by them. On that day, on a live session where all of us as management attended, we got the family to give the award to these Ansarian there, and not us giving it away. And to me, that I think that is a 10x value of creating the stickiness. So some of these, which were actually innovative ways to deal with, work around the challenge of not being able to do it in person, have become the new books in the engagement, playbook going forward. How technology can become so inclusive, how you can connect with the families which you would have normally not done in the real world. So some of these have become, new ways of life for us. Mercy, whoever has asked the question, yeah.
Yes, it was from Mr. Murthy, LS Murthy. So thank you so much for all the participants for making the session very interactive and asking all the nice questions to our panelists. And once again, thanks to all our speakers. Over to you, Varun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mercy. Thank you so much to all our speakers for the fantabulous session we have. Thank you, everybody and the panelists for